But I'm a big fan of Undertaker. I have been since day one, and that was before I even got to know him. To see how committed he was, how passionate he was, and what kind of I've talked about this a lot about aptitude. And did Taker have the aptitude to be a pro wrestling star? Well, the obvious answer to that is yes. He knew what he wanted to do, and he knew what he wanted to be, who he wanted to be. So I've always been a fan of his work. Maybe more importantly, I've been a fan of his character and his integrity. Taker became the undoubted locker room leader of WWE, and I don't think there's any debate on that situation. He assumed that role, and talents have gravitated to him. He was solid, and you could count on what he had to say. And I used him as the head of talent relations. I used Taker a lot. He didn't ask for it, but I knew he could communicate well with the talents. So if you had an issue with the talent, sometimes you call on Taker to intervene and to come to the rescue of some talent that's not doing well, not adjusting well. So, but the wrestlers loved the guy; they still do, and I'm really happy for what he's accomplished. He's made a lot of money, and God bless him. Uh, you know, uh, and he still lives down there in Austin. God bless him for that too. Uh, wouldn't be where I wanted to live, but nonetheless, I'm a Sooner. But I love the guy. He always could depend on Taker. He wrestled hurt, he wrestled beat up and bruised. He wrestled with guys that he was much better than, and his style is one that you got to be prepared for. So he paid all of his dues, and he did a great job for us. And I'm just so proud that I got a chance to know the guy, and he's that impressive to me. He's the Clint Eastwood of WWE. He's the Clint Eastwood of pro wrestling. Strong, silent type, but when he speaks, everybody listens.
I want to ask you about the locker room leader thing because I've heard that said universally forever, and I don't doubt it because everyone says it. But I do wonder when was that the case? Because he debuts at the end of 1990. So, like when you come in '93, we'll call it WrestleMania 9. Was your impression of him at that time in 1993 that he was already positioned as like the locker room leader, or is that something that came in the following year?
I think it's something it evolved in the following years. Not too long after that, but in the following years, he certainly proved himself to be a great communicator, and communication is a key. And he had that, and but you only could hope that he was going to be as good as he perceived, and he was better than advertised, quite frankly.
Let's talk about before he's in the WWF and becomes the Undertaker. He, like a lot of other guys, was under the employ of WCW. Pretty famous conversation over the years has been discussed that Ole Anderson had a contract discussion with Mean Mark Callis and said something like, no one would ever paid money to see you wrestle. And of course, we know eventually that proved to be one of the sillier statements in the history of wrestling. Millions of fans paid to see The Undertaker.
Yeah.
But Mean Mark Callis, do you think in an alternate universe that he could have achieved the same legendary status that he did in professional wrestling as Mean Mark Callis? Or how much credit do you give the Undertaker persona to that?
Oh, the Undertaker persona was the money. I don't see the magic in Mean Mark. That wasn't a great name. But we all saw magic and still see magic and feel magic, more importantly, perhaps, for Taker, and how he was received and how he's positioned. Taker was very fortunate that he had a support staff that led by the boss, by Vince McMahon. Vince loved Taker, and that's why Taker got so many opportunities because he always delivered. And of course, Bruce Pritchard was in Taker's corner, and Bruce working in the office didn't hurt Taker's situation whatsoever. So he came at the right place, right time, had the right surroundings, had the right people involved with him. So I'm as you can tell, I'm a big fan of Taker. I can see him doing no wrong. I never had an issue with him whatsoever. None. He just was a team guy, and he loved being he loved his role, and I'm really excited that that I got to work with him because he was just a treasure to work with, and I had no issues with sending him to talk to a talent or hey Taker, can you talk to so and so about blank? And he always accommodated, and he always got results. He's just a natural locker room leader, and man, you can't get too many of those. I can promise you.
What was your first impression of that Undertaker persona? I know you weren't there in the company at Survivor Series 1990, but I know you're a wrestling junkie like me, and you were keeping up with everything that the competition was doing. And you saw the former Mean Mark Callis come out with Brother Love. And I mean, it was a totally different character and presentation. But I could also see how a guy who grew up in the territory system and working with Watts and all that, you might take a look at this and say, boy, that's cartoon stuff. That's not going to work. And I think a lot of people would probably agree that with anyone else besides Mark Calloway, that Undertaker character, it probably had a shelf life, of a couple years, 2 or 3 years, something like that. Because we've seen all these other over the top, fantastic, supernatural characters sort of fizzle out. The Undertaker is the exception to that rule.
Right.
What was
No
your
doubt.
first impression when you saw it in 1990? Did you think this had a prayer of working?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I knew the talent,
Mm.
and I knew how hard the talent was going to compete to be great, and and Taker did all those things. So yeah, I was optimistic, cautiously optimistic, may be the best way of putting it, because at to that point, long term success had not been embraced by those that had the supernatural like gimmicks, and he was just he was special. He was special, and I didn't discount what he could accomplish in a frivolous way. I just thought that if given the opportunity and the promotional push, there's that word again, that push, that he would be fine, and he was, and he still is. There's no doubt in my mind that Taker could go out there today and have a one-off match with somebody that was skilled and be successful.